Wouldn't fit this under an hour anyways. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children, men and women of all ages, to a cold open, the coldest open possible. Actually, I don't even know if this is technically a cold open. My terminology is messed up. It's a Wednesday night, which means, ladies and gents, it is chaos after dark. It's back. And it's perfect timing, really, that it is here as we continue our 2024 NFL divisional previews here on your favorite NFL podcast, going for the last 114 episodes. If you have watched us at any point over the last 114 plus weeks, thank you. Welcome back. And why? But as we go through that, welcome to another episode filled with fun, football, and chaos. Let's get straight into it with my fellow compatriots of chaos. As always, the truculent trio that we are here. First, at the bottom of the screen, the games master himself, the domestic national man of mystery, and I say that because he's going to be traveling around a lot. I can't say international; you're not going overseas. So
I'm confused.
Yeah, so am I at this point. But our games master Justin's at the bottom of the screen. Justin, how are we doing?
I'm doing good. You know, a little football at night gets me excited for some Thursday night football, some Monday night football. It's exciting stuff. Sunday night too, I guess. Is that what you're going for, Rick?
Yep. Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Saturday
night. Any night there's football is a good night to me.
Exactly. Any night for football is a good night for football.
Yes, whether we're watching it, whether we're talking about it, whether you're playing it on NCAA College Football 25, not Madden, because good Lord knows that the Madden game is still trash, but the NCAA game is pretty good. Working out, things here and there. But EA's finally produced a good football game after so many years, boys. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? What a time to be alive. Speaking of what a time to be alive, it continues as we finish the NFC this episode. We will head west to go over the final division we need to talk about this week.
Hi, by the way, I'm the Podfather. He didn't introduce me, but it's nice to meet you all.
Well, you gave yourself a cold open, so ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know. There we go. My tag on the bottom's not even there either, so it's okay. No big deal.
Yes, the Podfather himself, Rick, is here now playing at a. Just the random taglines at the bottom persist with the Podfather himself.
I'm a regular comedy writer, I guess. I don't know.
Really
also, by the way, according to the Postal Service, save the manatees. So, that's what I'm doing.
Save the manatees. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing with our NFL divisional breakdowns. We finished the NFC this week. Of course, we changed up the format this year, fully going through one conference before going to the next. We are going through the NFC first this year because the NFC didn't win. I think it's relatively simple to say the very least. And this is the last division left standing because the Super Bowl runner-up and the NFC champion came from this division. So it's only right that we finish off with the NFC West. Once again, I feel like both West divisions have finished every single year. So it's going to be very interesting to see if we do continue this next year, if a new division reigns supreme over either the AFC or the NFC. Only time will tell, of course, in that regard. But time is of the essence. We're here to talk football. But before we get to the football, we're here for fun. Justin, actually, no, excuse me, the Podfather.
What?
As he is licking envelopes and sending postage out. Get us going this week, Podfather, with your mind-blowing fact.
Remember, licking doorknobs is illegal on other planets. Just remember that. So I originally had one set up, and then I did a stumble upon, as I normally do, and it got me into an interesting little spot with the 1994 Green Bay Packers. And the reason for this is because, now we're in training camp. And so now you hear about quarterback competitions that are going on in training camps. We talked about them. I think this week it was announced that Jacoby Brissett is the QB1 in New England, even though they drafted Drake May at number 3. Well, in 1994, the Green Bay Packers had a very interesting time with their quarterback battles in training camp, because they had a clear number 1, but you couldn't make an argument that any of the other guys that they had going into that season could have been a number 1 and actually became number 1s in other teams. So 1994 Green Bay Packers. The top of the QB depth chart was, of course, one Mr. Brett Favre. He of the Southern Mississippi Golden Eagles, of course, as you now know. But there was an interesting competition between number 2 and number 3. Number 2 on the depth chart was a gentleman who would later go on to great success with an expansion team, and then would also continue on a very long and fruitful career that has led him currently to be the quarterbacks coach of the Detroit Lions. That would be Mark Brunell, was the number 2 in Green Bay in 1994. The number 3 in Green Bay is a player who we can best describe as a guy who peaked in college, because this gentleman in 1990 won the Heisman Trophy in one of the greatest junior seasons in modern football history, passing for 5,188 yards and 41 touchdowns in 12 regular season games, finishing that year with either solo or a share of 47 NCAA records. That would be Ty Detmer. And number 4 on the depth chart was a gentleman who that year was an undrafted free agent. Somebody who went to an FCS school. Didn't exactly pan out immediately over there, but then decided to have one of the greatest comeback stories in the history of modern football. After a little bit of barnstorming and shelf stocking, number 4 on the depth chart was Kurt Warner, gentlemen. Before he went to the Rams and before he went to the grocery stores and the Arena Football League, he was an undrafted free agent for the Green Bay Packers in the year of 1994. So that was a pretty decently deep quarterback room going into training camp. Warner didn't last, obviously. So the other 3 made the team. And to further this discussion, that year, the Packers went 9-7, won their wild card game against the Lions, and lost a very bad divisional playoff game to the Cowboys, 35-9. Interesting story about this season, too. This was the last year that the Packers actually split their home games between Lambeau Field and Milwaukee County Stadium. So you get a nice little double mind-blowing factoid today that the Green Bay Packers didn't always play in Lambeau. They played in Milwaukee in some games, too. And that, again, that quarterback depth chart going into training camp in 94 was knowing what we know now about those 4 guys and how prolific each one was at some point in their careers. Hard to pick a favorite.
Is that the obviously, again, this is hindsight 2020, but is that the best quarterback depth chart of all 4 of these guys? Like there was a little something to them throughout their, like a strong
I would
4?
say so, because I mean, I can't even tell you one where I think of a good 3. You know, there's been a good 2 every so often. Like you have in Washington currently, you have Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota, who are 2 Heisman Trophy winners.
Yeah,
you know, but I can't really tell you anything about the 3rd or the 4th guys. You know,
right.
I think this is, for my money, pound for pound, this is the best chart that I've seen going into a training camp. And also, interestingly enough, about 94, one thing that I forgot to mention is that in the 5th round, the 149th overall pick, was a guy that if you played Madden back in the early 2000s and late 90s and you played against Green Bay, he probably was slicing and dicing your defense up and you were very mad at him. Dorsey Levens was drafted in 1994 as well. So the Packers had a really good time in 94. Didn't show on the field, but they had a really good time leading in that season.
This is why in the future, whenever we get the more time to do it, when we start to go through teams because we've always talked about like going back to previous years and like teams and like reviewing teams in certain years. This is just a preview of that, ladies and gentlemen. And Rick's just going through the quarterback depth chart. Mm-hmm. Imagine the rest of that team.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember we did a Seattle Seahawks drop one time, like one of the first couple of mind blowing facts. So if I got to start bringing that back, which I will, I will.
It'll be fun to say the very least when we do fully start to go through that. Just what fun there is to just go through random years and random teams, right?
Always fun to go through them.
And it won't just be good teams, guys. If you've watched the show, we're going to cover some really funny teams.
You know that we enjoy ragging on the bad ones too.
Yes, and the head scratchers. I know if when we do make this happen, well, hopefully, one of the first like 3 to 4 teams we need to cover is that one Chargers team. What's the stat? They were number 1 in offense and defense in a season, and they still missed the postseason.
Oh yeah, yep.
That needs to be like to the top of our list of what happened.
Deep dive on that one. I would say we could call it 30 for 30, but I think that's trademarked by somebody. I can't remember who.
Probably. Perhaps a company that someone here works for. You never know.
Justin's conglomerate of pens and pencils. They make 30 for 30s.
Yes. One pen for each day of the average month. 30 pens for 30 days.
Yes, exactly. I like it.
So with that done and completed, another fantastic mind-blowing fact to say the very least. Rick always comes strong when it comes to delivering us the mind-blowing facts. He gave us like 2 3 for 1 right there with all the information there. So that was a gem to say the very least, which the Podfather consistently does when it comes to his mind-blowing facts. So let's go that was still fun, but let's go facts. Let's go pure fun with still some facts here, because it is time for everyone's new favorite game of Name That Player. If we ever do this in front of a live show one day, which that'll be like 20 years into the future, it'll be better with like an actual audience doing that. Justin, the floor is yours.
All right, guys. So if you were paying attention last week,
damn it,
this player is one of 5 players born on where is it? Found one of 5 British-born players to have won a Super Bowl. He was drafted in the 5th round out of Boise State.
Man,
guys, what are we talking about?
See, I paid attention last week and I thought of OCU Manure and I thought, nah, he's not pulling this. He's not pulling this too easy.
Yeah, OC is the only one that came to mind.
So the question is, did you look up the other 4?
Definitely not.
I mean, we would, but then we would ruin the fact that maybe we did.
Why I didn't announce the last 4 last week, because I was like, I'm going to do this guy.
Oh, okay, well, good for you then.
Went to Boise State.
Yep.
British born.
Okay.
And won a Super Bowl.
Drafted in the 5th round.
I feel like the Super Bowl team he won with is going to be like the 3rd row of hints, Rick. I think it'll be the ultimate rabbit out of the hat if we somehow get this before the 3rd row of hints.
Probably, yeah. Probably.
We both know it's not OC, so it doesn't make sense for us to use our first guess there.
Correct. That is an absolutely accurate statement there. God, I'm trying to think of who even went to
Boise State to then make it to the NFL. That was lucky enough, or maybe somewhat good enough, depending on who it is, to then win a Super Bowl. I'm trying to think of just a funny first name so we could like keep this rolling.
Jared Zabransky.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is.
Pause. Time out. He was the quarterback in the Fiesta Bowl game when they beat Oklahoma.
Did he play in the NFL?
Yeah, like he was like a practice squad player, but he still the hook and ladder, the Ian Johnson, the Statue of Liberty play. Come on, man!
I know what play it is.
He was on the cover of NCAA football, I think that.
Well,
year.
he's not. He didn't win a Super Bowl.
I know. I'm very sad about that. I'm very bitter about that. Okay.
Bitter about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Rick's guy, Tanner McKee.
You went to Stanford, dude. Come on. Even I know that.
He also did not. Did he win a Super Bowl? Well, he was on the team when they won the Super Bowl, right?
I don't know.
Tanner McKee? No.
He's also definitely not from Britain.
No, absolutely not. No.
Well, then we move on.
Oh, boy.
Moving to Maryland when he was 7 years old, this person rushed for 2,000 yards and 35 touchdowns in high school, was a varsity leader in track and field, before going on to Boise State, where he rushed for 3,796 yards and 50 touchdowns over 3 seasons. In the NFL, he became only the 4th player to rush for back-to-back 200-yard games.
Back-to-back 200-yard games. Wait. Okay.
Oh, I'm waiting.
I know this guy, he had a little run. He got multiple 200-yard games. I don't remember if they were back-to-back, though.
Did he go to Boise State?
I don't know. But he got 200.
Did he win a Super Bowl, Jerg?
Did he?
So that's the thing that I'm thrown off because I have a name in mind, but I don't know if he won a Super Bowl or not. Because I know he had. I think similarly he had a little bit of a run, but I don't know if he won a Super Bowl.
I don't know. Do you say your guy first? I'll say my guy next, Rick.
Jay Ajayi.
That was my guy, actually. Jay Ajayi.
Both got the same guy, huh?
The only other Boise State running back I could think of is Doug Martin, but here's how I know it's not Doug Martin for multiple reasons. One, he didn't win a Super Bowl.
Well, there's that, yes.
But two, he was like the first 4 or 5 years of his career was the definition of hot and cold. He would have I think he rushed for 1,000 yards his rookie year, then was like sub 500 yards the next year, then went back to over 1,000 rushing yards his third year. It was really an up and down career for Doug Martin.
I mean, it's an up and down career for Jay Ajayi too, if you think about it.
Yeah. But yeah, Jay Ajayi was like the guy I thought of because it's like he had the multiple 200-yard games with the Dolphins.
Uh-huh.
But I forgot if they were back to back, and I could not tell you what team he was randomly on that won the Super Bowl.
Well, it would be probably the Eagles then, I would think, right? Wasn't he around that time?
Was he?
Was he on the Eagles?
Was he lucky enough to get traded to that Eagles team that won? I mean,
he win a Super Bowl.
I can't think of it. Like those are the only 2 Boise State running backs to me.
I mean, Brock Forsey's a guy, but he's not. Jeremy McNichols is a guy, but he's born in Torrance, California, or wherever, so it wasn't him. So
it's interesting. Also, when I said he was the 4th person to ever do something, and you guys went so recent.
Well, I mean, just because it's the 4th doesn't mean that it's.
That's true.
Not the most recent.
That's true. And I will say here that you guys are absolutely correct. It is Jay Ajayi who I was going for there. He won. He was the 2nd leading rusher on that Eagles team. He was traded for a 4th round pick, I believe.
I can pull it up. I can pull up the trade.
I have it right here. He was traded for a 2018 4th round pick.
Wow.
He rushed for 57 yards in that Eagles victory. He had a lot of injuries, unfortunately, in his career. Ended up with only 2,546 rushing yards, and 13 rushing touchdowns. I believe only had 1 multi-touchdown game. Did not get into the end zone a ton, but I mean, a career unfortunately just completely derailed with injuries. This kid had it when he was on the field, but yeah, at least he got that 1 victory. And Jay Ajayi is number 2 of 5 English-born players to have won a Super Bowl. If you want to know the other 3? Tune in next week. No,
Justin needs to spread it out so that.
Yeah, there's only 5 of them, Justin. Like, you know.
So I guess Jay Ajayi, like now looking him up more, would he? Because I don't know if we talked about doing it as a segment, but just like maybe for fun one time, we talked about one-hit wonders. He would be a one-hit wonder, no?
Oh,
he only had the 1 season of over 1,000 rushing yards.
Yeah. I mean, he had a couple of okay seasons. It's just he was never a big touchdown scorer, and then he could never make it past 16 games. Really, he started 12 and played in 15 in 2016, which was the one good season. The next best season was his rookie year, was 9 games played, and apparently he was up and down because he was on IR, and then he was not getting along with his head coach, one Adam Gase in Miami.
I can only imagine why.
I mean, who would?
And then after that, it was 7 games, 4 games, and 3 games. So.
I mean, but that's also the thing too that I think is the most amazing part. That should have been your third and final hit there, Justin. Was that somehow, some way, this guy had his best career season in an Adam Gase offense?
Not to mention the fact that I believe he was benched that year too. He was So they lost Lamar Miller to the Texans.
Yep.
He was supposed to be the starter, but then they went out and they signed Arian Foster. And then he was disgruntled during training camp with Adam Gase, and Adam Gase straight up deactivated him for the season opener. So he would have played all 16 games that year, but Adam Gase benched him and deactivated him. Then the next week, he only had 5 carries for 14 yards. Foster got hurt, and then he just went off. And he had week 6, 204 yards, week 7, 214 yards, and 1 touchdown against the Steelers and Bills, respectively. And, I mean, he was just a guy on fire. He even had a third 200-yard game that season.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's
At the
true.
expense of the Bills again. Twice against the Bills.
Well, one thing, Justin, with everything that we unpack there as we go over J.J.'s one-hit wonder season, if we're being fair here, we might be being too hard on Adam Gase because remember, Arian Foster said everything's scripted, so Adam Gase knew J.J. was going to go off, but to add more intrigue, he has to deactivate him first and then put him in the line.
If it's scripted, would it not be up to him and he was going to have to bench him no matter what?
You know,
that's what I'm saying. We can't be too hard on Adam Gase because it's scripted.
You know, that point comes from a mind of a guy who loves Max Verstappen to defend Adam Gase in this forum, but with two very hurt Jets fans. We could have had Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah. There's a lot of reasons for that issue, though.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's true.
So we have Aaron Rodgers now, so maybe we'll win something.
Maybe.
I believe in him.
Yeah.
I believe in Aaron Rodgers.
Just get to the fifth play. That's all I want.
In a couple weeks' time, ladies and gentlemen, we will go over the AFC East, and that will probably be my favorite division for us to spend some time on. Just because I got 2 Jets fans here once again. Last year we only had 1 Jets fan for the division previews, but this year we got 2 of them.
This year we kind of only have 1 Jets fan too.
Whoa!
Gimmick, you know.
Well, that's true. I am very gimmicky. That's true.
So, with that segue, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to the meat and potatoes of the show. First off, as my guy Bars always says. So, Justin, once again, phenomenal job with the games, as always. Beautiful work, as always, boys. We continue it next week once again.
Does Bars get royalty checks every time you say meat and potatoes and name drop him on the show? Is that why you do it? You pay his bills or something?
I have to add an extra $5 to what I'm gonna have to pay him when I go to his wedding next year.
Oh well, okay, yep, that's fine. Venmo.
Where is he getting paid from the show?
No, he's getting paid from Jerk specifically.
Don't worry about that.
You guys are getting paid?
No. Jerk's doling out whatever money he has left from his Walmart account to pay Bars every time he name drops him on the show. You know,
kind of true.
To be left out. You know,
exactly.
Use the monnie.
No,
we all could use the money.
We really could.
Yeah. One of us just had a kid.
Well, bye.
Are we still able to say
what?
Are we able to? Do we technically still refer to it as just had a kid when it's been like 8 or 9 months?
Well, I mean, up until the first year, yes, because once you hit year 1, it's like congratulations, you had a living thing and you held it and you made it survive a full year. So now you know.
Until it's like walking and talking, or like around that age, you just had a kid.
Oh, she's close.
Yeah,
she's close though, man. Yeah.
I was gonna say we know she's very close to walking.
Even if it's like a year and like a couple months, like you just had that kid.
Yeah.
You are at the beginning of that thing still.
Well, again. Let's just say what the obvious. We are 3 men. We will never know what it's like to actually have the kid.
That's true.
So the women can say just had the kid. The men are like, we were there, but like we didn't go through what they went through in the delivery of the child. Am I right?
Yes.
Thank you.
There we go.
All right, Rick's wife's there. I don't want to get in trouble. Let's
well, no,
I'm
honestly,
just a sarcastic smartass. It's not because I don't believe in the empowerment of women. It's a different thing.
Well, honestly, my joke was just going to be, who are you to assume there will ever be children?
I was going to say that we do things together, and it's a team effort.
Yeah, no.
My pain is her pain, and her pain.
Oh, you're talking about that. I thought you meant that. I was like, no. I go rogue. I do things my own way. So,
My joke was just going to be, I'm never having kids. I'm the last of my bloodline, ladies and gentlemen. The head of the table. And with that being said, we need to talk about the head of the table of the NFC, because for the 3rd year in a row, we finish the NFC portion of the breakdowns with the NFC West because, well, sort of, kind of for the second time in the last 3 years. It's an NFC West team that made it to the Super Bowl. So, yeah, it's time for us to talk about the NFC West. The NFC West is a very interesting division, I think, for us to break down. To say the very least, this is the division that had, as I said, the NFC champions from this past season. This is also the division that, if we rewind a couple seasons ago, had the Super Bowl winners, because just a couple years ago, the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl, and then they took 2022 off, and the Seattle Seahawks rose up to take that wild card spot, and then they flipped back positions, you could say. Kind of like what you're supposed to do in a race when there's an agreement that the drivers just make it go easy without team orders having to make a complete joke of it over the radio. Thank you, McLaren. With that being said,
this is a football podcast.
Yes.
Yes. Well, hey, if he can bring up Max Verstappen, I can bring up the actual F1 team that I root for.
This is too much F1 and not enough football.
So kindly jump off.
Bring back JHIE.
And anyways,
NASCAR.
So with that being said, the Seahawks and the Rams were in opposite spots in 2022. Then they flipped back in 2023. So who knows what it's going to be in 2024. But we think we have an idea of what will happen in 2024. That's the Arizona Cardinals not being great in this division. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we've done with the 3 previous divisions, and as we will do once we get to the AFC side, the way that we're going to break down each division is we're going to go from the bottom of how they finished last year to the top of the review of the teams. And then at the end, when we give our predictions for the division, we'll go from 4 to 3, give our winner, and then subsequently our second place is also good as well. So there's that for you. In case you're new to this, which if you're somehow finding this at episode 114, I don't know how we stayed off your radar for about 2 years, but,
the same way the rest of the world has.
Welcome to the show. So, boys, let's get straight to the Arizona Cardinals. Of all the teams that finished 4th last year, and that people are probably going to project to finish 4th again this year, they are different compared to the other teams that we've talked about in 4th. Because I think of the Washington Commanders, right? They just had the 2nd overall pick. They're going to build a team with their young quarterback now that they have time to do that, right? The Carolina Panthers is jokes that we want to make about them, which, trust me, there will be plenty this season. And if you need more, well, go back to the actual review section for them. The Cardinals are a bit different, though, because I think of – and also last week with Minnesota, with all of us believing the Vikings will finish 4th, that team just drafted a quarterback in the 1st round, whereas the Bears, who finished 4th last year, just got the 1st overall pick. So I give all that context to say – so far, there's been a pattern through the teams that we've discussed towards the bottom of their divisions, right? There's young quarterbacks there. There's incoming rookie quarterbacks, or in the case of Carolina, a rookie that just finished up his 1st season, now going into year 2, right? Arizona is not that. This is not a team that is looking to draft a quarterback, we don't think. This is not a team that is bringing in a rookie quarterback to start. This is a team that has a perceived to be franchise quarterback because they've paid him. And this is a team that the experiment with the coach that they thought would fit that quarterback failed prior to 2023. This is a team that surprised us all in 2021. Hot start, made the postseason, and it's been all downhill since then. Because 2022 was not a great year. 2023 was not a great year because Kyler Murray missed so much of the season. Now we're entering a campaign in 2024. You have Kyler Murray, who I think all 3 of us believe that there is another level to his game he can unlock. But it's a 2-pronged question of, can he unlock it himself, or can the coaching staff get it out of him, right? You have young Marvin Harrison Jr. there, who you just drafted to be the playmaker of the future. You drafted a left tackle last year. So you have a franchise left tackle. You have a young weapon for the guy. You have who you hope is your franchise quarterback that should be playing well. So you look at those 3 things, and it's like, okay, they might have something. And then you look at the other 18 starting positions, because Budda Baker is actually still there as well. Then you look at the other 18 starting positions on the Cardinals. And no, from Maron, it's not pretty. Justin, I'm going to you first. Arizona Cardinals 2024, what sense can we make of this team going into the season?
I think it's going to be heavily reliant on the success of their young receivers. We all know what Kyler Murray can be. Offensive line has to play well. Obviously, we want James Conner to stay healthy because he's a fairly good running back there. But I mean, I guess you could put all the skill position players in there because they still have a young Trey Benson, and they did sign Michael Carter from the Jets last season. What do they have at receiver that can help complement the playing style of Kyler Murray? Because I don't think necessarily they're going to be horrendous on defense, but I don't think they're going to light the world on fire either. They're going to be middle of the pack. They're going to be young. They're trying to move forward with some speed, and they re-signed Budda Baker, which I think was the right move. You don't get a player of that caliber just out of nowhere. So can this young core of receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr. being the leader there, can they make things happen on the field? I mean, Michael Wilson was decent last year, but he's never really had like a real dominating season or performance. Zay Jones, he had flashes in Jacksonville, but can he bring a little fire to this offense? I think we're going to see this team move as the offense moves. But it's hard to say where this offense is going, especially with the amount of question marks there. So we'll see what their schedule brings them. I think that the schedule has its ups and downs. There's certainly some games where I think that they could pull it out, but there's some games that they're probably going to struggle in. So we'll have to see.
And there we go. It's very interesting. Justin mentions the schedule here, Rick. This has obviously been a big key point over as now we get to our third season of doing this. We bring up the schedule because it really does matter who you're facing. And they're facing the NFC North, as we discussed in the NFC North episode last week. The NFC West and North are taking on each other. But they're also having the AFC East, all the NFC West teams have on their schedule. And they're opening their season against an AFC East team in away territory because they're facing the Buffalo Bills for week 1. Should be a very intriguing matchup, to say the very least, and depending on what we hear coming out of training camp, the preseason, maybe injuries and such, maybe could the Cardinals be a little bit cheeky in week 1 and get an upset victory, or will the Buffalo Bills, restore order somewhat after what was a chaotic year for them? But again, that's for the AFC East episode when we get into more detail with that. But I mentioned they open the season at Buffalo, right? Then they go back home to face a decent 3-game home stretch against the Rams, against the Lions, and against the Commanders. No, not bad. But it's just tough games before their bye week, which is a week 11 bye week, by the way. And they face the Jets before that bye week, and they're in Seattle after that bye week. So what a season for Arizona the schedule makers put together for them, Rick. Kind of like, what Justin was talking about. It's just kind of like question marks in several aspects of this team, right? Like in theory, they have the quarterback that, I think a lot of teams would be cool with a quarterback of Kyler's caliber because they could probably think they could take him to the next level. Justin was talking about, you have what we all believe is going to be the number one piece to this offense in Marvin Harrison Jr. And by the way, a very good, I think still underrated tight end in Trey McBride as well. I think he's a very good guy, to say the very least, as your tight end. Like that's two very, I think reliable / high upside options for both those guys, but especially obviously Maserati Marv. But the rest of that offense, I think Justin was referring to it as question mark, question mark, question mark. Like of your 11 starters, how many definitive spots do you have locked in? And I'm talking about definitive, you're confident what their level of play will be for 2024 and beyond. There's Kyler, in theory. There's James Conner. Okay. Marvin Harrison. All right, that's 3. It's a decent start. Who are your other wide receivers? Then you get to Trey McBride. That's pretty good, right? And then Paris Johnson Jr. And that's 5 out of 11. Not great. And then are you confident in Jonah Williams at right tackle? A guy who, let's be honest, he whined, moaned, and complained his way out of Cincinnati because he didn't want to be there anymore because Orlando Brown Jr. took his job. To then go to a team where he's not going to be left tackle because they already have left tackle. So it's interesting, to say the least, in Arizona, no matter which way you shake it out. So, Rick, tell us your thoughts about the Cardinals going into 2024.
I spent a little bit of part of this week kind of going back and forth on my views on the Cardinals, and I'll be honest with you, I'm a little more bullish on them than I think you guys are. I think a fully healthy Kyler coming back into the fold for this offense is really going to help them churn out a good amount of running attack, because this is a very stacked running back room. Yes, you have Connor there, but you have Amari DiMercato, Michael Carter, the ex-Jet, is still on this team as well. And they drafted Trey Benson, who I think is one of the better running backs in this class. To answer your question, Jurg, about who's opposite Marvin Harrison Jr., well, Zay Jones is their big pickup. So he could be a number 2 option there. Michael Wilson is there as well, the guy they drafted last year. And they have some other slot receivers they could use. Zach Pascal's a guy they could work with, and Greg Dortch as well. Trey McBride is a very, very solid tight end for this team. And Paris Johnson Jr., he's very talented. He's got a good potential to be a very solid left tackle in this league. And the rest of the offensive line, they need to work on some things. But I almost think that this is a better set for Jonah Williams than Cincinnati was, because he was never going to be the left tackle again there. So maybe a change of scenery helps him out. Maybe playing in a different division kind of helps him out in that aspect there. You want better seasons from your guards. You got to figure out who your center is. I think they're going with the guy from Denmark, Froholt, right now on the depth chart as their starting center. And this defense, which is a base 4-3, I mean, they have good pieces all around. They have, they drafted Darius Robinson in the first round. He could be a good guy on the edge, along with, LJ Collier, Bilal Nichols, Zaven Collins. They want to line him up on the edge. They could do that too. Cameron Thomas, BJ Ojolari, Kazir White on a linebacking core. And I mean, look, if this season goes south, then Buda Baker's gone. But if this season is still decent enough at some point or another, Buda Baker could be a very key aspect of this team making a very surprising run. So I think there are enough talented pieces here to make a statement. And I do think that schedule kind of in some ways favors them, because you're right. They have to play the NFC North and the AFC East, we said, but also look at the games against the random divisions. Look at the games that they have that are outside of that realm. The Chargers, which who knows what the Chargers are going to be this year. I mean, they're always still kind of a question, especially now with Jim Harbaugh. That's a big question mark. And Carolina. I mean, could that be a tank bowl game? It's possible, but could this be a game where you have a surprising Cardinals team playing against a really terrible Panthers team? I mean, well, the second part of it is obviously going to be true, but the first part of it, the surprising Cardinals team. And listen, if Kyler gets back into the fold of what we think Kyler Murray can be, if he shows that 2020, 2021 Kyler that was running all over the field, that was especially the 2020 Kyler that almost threw for 4,000 and rushed for 1,000, I think this could be a surprising year for an Arizona team. And I think they're going to be competitive, at least in some of these divisional games. Obviously, not when it comes to the very top team, but these other two teams that are there, with Arizona, this is an interesting – you can see a surprise in this division. And I think, like I said, I'm a little more bullish on the Cardinals than the both of you are.
I mean, the Cardinals are definitely going to get their fair share of performances where they do really well, right? Like, I even think to just the first couple of weeks of last season, they had a big lead on the Giants before they blew it. Probably shouldn't have blown that lead, hindsight 2020. And they upset the Dallas Cowboys, like, what, a week? It was a week before or a week after that.
But don't forget, they also beat the Eagles, too, in, like, week 17 of last year.
So it's one of those, like, I'm not going to doubt that the Cardinals can do a little something here and there. Like, it's just, I think the question I have for this team is, like, you're a squad that has the quarterback that you believe should be your guy going forward. Like, they paid him to be that guy. You could say, yes, it was the old general manager. That contract is still so fresh and new. The new general manager has no choice but to make it work. So you have the quarterback, you have the left tackle, you have the wide receiver. You point out the defense. I do really love BJ Ojolari. And Max Melton was one of their picks that I did like. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think I picked him in our mock draft.
I believe so, yeah.
As well. So I'm high on him. Sean Murphy-Bunting is a guy who I've praised in the past for his time in Tampa, not so much Tennessee, but that's not his fault. He had to go where he had to go.
Tennessee.
And then Buda Baker. Like, it's very weird that here's how I say it. There are individuals on this team that can be starting for playoff caliber teams. But this is not a playoff caliber team. So this is why I ask, what are you in 2024 Arizona? Because you're not, as I made the connection to the other low seeds from last year, you're not a team that has a young franchise quarterback going forward. Like, this is not a kid on his rookie deal. I mean, Kyler's technically young, but you guys know what I mean. He's not on his rookie deal or going into his second year. There are some pieces around him, but there's still significant work to be done. And also, this is year 2 of Jonathan Gannon and that coaching staff. And I guess, to be fair, this is also year 1 where they're properly getting to work with Kyler, because Kyler was injured going into last year. Like, there was communication with him, of course. Jonathan Gannon had to make sure he had that fire in his gut, whether he drove there or he took the bus there. Probably didn't, considering he was injured last season, Jonathan. But, beggars can't be choosers. Does Kyler Murray have a fire in his gut, I guess, is what Jonathan Gannon is going to be looking at this season, because not much else he can be looking at, right? I mean, like, I'm not saying they're going to be worse than last year. I'd say it's difficult to be worse than 4-13, but the Commanders and the Panthers exist, so maybe it is. But like for this team, like I don't think they would be worse than that. I'm not saying they're going to be worse, but like I look at a team like this, I'm like, what is the vision? Is it just to be? I can't even say mid, because to me mid is at least 8-1, 8-9, 9-8, competing for the wild card. but I don't think they'll be that. But I don't think they're going to be 4-win bad. So are you mid in the middest way possible? Maybe the second middest way possible of you're not good, you're not awful, you're not average. Like, I don't know. Like, this team confuses me is what I'm trying to say for the long-term future. But maybe there's no need to think about the long-term future because we're just talking about 2024. And 2024, it probably is going to be a little bit of a rough year. And you're just hoping that I think the number one thing, of course, Kyler comes back, he's healthy, and him and his coaching staff can get it together because it became very, very clear to the end of Cliff Kingsbury's time there that Kyler was just done with him, which I don't blame him for. So now, it's a fresh time, first full proper offseason and training camp and everything with this squad being fully healthy. Can they make it work? And if they can, maybe it does get interesting down the line in Arizona. I'm not saying it can't at all, and I probably do think they'll get an upset win or two at some point this season. But I don't know. I think it's fair questions to be asked about this team. Like, what are you? What are you for 2024? So that's right. Any notes on this team before we move on? Or any final notes, I should say.
No, it seems good to me.
All right, and shout out to the backup quarterback battle for this team: Desmond Ridder versus Clayton Tune.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad.
Bad to say the very least. I mean, they traded a player for Desmond Ridder. That's the funny part.
Yeah.
Over to Arizona or over to Atlanta. Excuse me. All right, we move on to Seattle. So a lot of people had faith in Seattle going into the 2023 campaign, and that was for a number of reasons. Whether you believe that Pete Carroll being there, it was a year after Pete Carroll helped galvanize this team to a surprise playoff berth in 2022. They had going into last season Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, right? A wide receiving core that was adding a youngster, a solid offensive line, right? Not world beating, maybe slightly above league average at best. Decent tight end room, solid defense. And the Seahawks kind of just fell apart last season. And a big part of that was due to injuries. And so I think for me, and I'll throw it to Rick here first, I think the number one thing will just be consistency throughout the lineup because it's not one specific player that you can point out on this team that, this is how I feel. The Seahawks are not a team where an injury to one player should unravel the season. It'll suck if one of their key guys goes out for a couple weeks, but it shouldn't break the team's back because I think in a couple spots, there's some really good pieces here, right? Like I think it's a decent defensive backfield that they have where if one of their starters has to miss a game or two, they can recover from that. And I'm saying this, for a team that had Jamal Adams, which is basically dead weight for defensive backfield the last couple of years, they were able to make it work with him there. So there's that. But like this wide receiving core, if DK misses 2 or 3 games, it's not ideal. You'd like him to play, but Tyler Lockett could fill in to be a number one guy for 2-3 weeks. Jackson Smith and Jigba, you're hoping for big things in year 2. Like this is a Seahawk team that I think just all around inconsistency and injuries unraveled them in 2023. So Rick, 2024, what is the biggest hurdle Seattle has to overcome to get back into the proper playoff conversation?
Getting out of the specter of this being a Pete Carroll team because it's not anymore. It's Michael McDonald is the new head coach. The Ravens defensive coordinator, and also not the soul singer. Not Michael McDonald, the other Mike McDonald. I know. I'm very sad too. I want to hear. I keep forgetting. I don't love it anymore all over again. But it's true in Seattle. Look. I'll go a step further. This is a very, very good defensive backfield because it's not just Witherspoon and Woolen. It's Artie Burns. It's Kobe Bryant and Julian Love. This is a very talented Legion of Boom-esque 2.0 in a way in that defensive backfield. Is it a good linebacking core? You could say that. I mean, Boye Mafe is pretty good, and Derek Hall had a pretty decent season last year, I believe, for them. There's solid enough players. They drafted Byron Murphy, who has the potential to be a really good player, to go along with Leonard Williams on the front line. Jonathan Hankins is there too. And that, offensive line kind of took a step backwards a little bit last year, but you're right, there's some injury problems there. But they have Charles Cross, who we all loved, and Christian Haynes they drafted pretty high to go with Abe Lucas and Oluwasegun Oluwatimi, the kid out of Michigan they drafted. My 2 areas of concern with this squad on offense are the fact that they don't have a consistent tight end option because Noah Fant was the main piece they got back in the Russell Wilson trade, and he didn't really perform like you would expect a tight end to do. I think he only played in 11 games that had 19 catches last year, but again, that's injuries for you. And then I'm sorry, but this has to be a bounce back year in a way for Geno. It has to be because again, he had some injury problems. He still had a solid year last year. I'm not going to put down the fact that he threw for 3,600 yards and had a very good touchdown interception ratio of 20-9. It's just you want more because now I think the defenses can read that and they can see him a little bit better. And not for nothing, they downgraded a little bit in the backup because Drew Lock, he was at least solid enough to win you a couple of games, but Sam Howell was 21 he was 9 touchdowns and picks away from a 30-30 season, but he was 21-21. That you can't say anything about that because it wasn't the greatest year for him. So if it's not there consistently for Geno on the offset, then they're going to run into the problems. I think if this team relies too heavily on the run, it's because Geno's not up to snuff right away, or because nagging injuries to DK, or JSN having a sophomore slump, or Lockett not playing up to his potential. Those are problems for this team. And look, they have a pretty easy 2 weeks to start the year to figure it out when they host Denver and then go to New England. But then you've got 4 really tough matchups with Miami, with Detroit, with a Giants defense that can really get to Geno pretty consistently. And then your first divisional game against San Francisco, which is on a Thursday night game, which is a short week. So you're hosting the Niners, the reigning NFC champions, on 4 days rest early in the season. Not ideal for a team that wants to try and come back into it. So I think for the Seahawks, it's going to be a matter of, can Geno be consistent and can Noah Fant step up to help out this offense? Because if not, it's probably going to be a similar year to what it was last year. And keep in mind, this was the team last year that was right in the thick of things all the way to the end. They were 9-8 last year, and so if they're 9-8 again, it's not great, but
maybe they get lucky and they can get the job done.
Like we said for Washington, just survive the year. Survive
the year and see where you're at. And this is a team that I think that the inconsistency of last season really plagued them because, we pointed out, I think defensively, even though their numbers may seem a little bit better, remember, this was a team that I think the bulk of their sack production last year came from one game against the Giants. Funny enough. They had 9 sacks against the Giants. I forget what their final sack numbers were that year. Those 9 sacks made up a good chunk of the total number of that. So the defensive line, to me, definitely is one of the key factors to step up on this team. Like the front 7 just needs to prove itself because there's no big name player in this front 7. There's decent guys. There's guys who have contributed in the past, whether it be on the Seahawks team itself and a Jaron Reed, or that have contributed on other decent teams in the past, whether it be a Draymond Jones, a Leonard Williams, a Jonathan Hankins, a Jerome Baker, right? There's good names. There's no high-level star player. And obviously they allowed him to leave again for a reason. I'm saying in the front 7.
I'm saying Mafe had 93 tackles and 12 sacks last year. So, that's a guy who
ascending. That's ascending. But he needs
ascending. I agree.
So this is a team that I know they let him go in free agency. You almost wish that maybe if not Bobby Wagner himself, a Bobby Wagner-esque linebacker was there, because I think that would really put it together. Because if you have Boya Mafe as your main guy putting pressure on the quarterback, if you got that guy in the second level to really be there looking out for running backs that are coming out the flats, looking at the tight ends that are doing, intermediate route, that I think would really put this defense together a lot better comparatively, to point out. But no, I think I could mention that with the defense, but I think your point about the offense is, to me, is just consistency with this team. And, what kind of consistency are we going to get with a first-time head coach what is his play style going to be like? Is he going to – and this is a guy coming from Baltimore. Yes, he was the defensive coordinator there, but this is a guy coming from Baltimore, this defensive coordinator. Do you think maybe he's going to lean on that run a bit, and could it maybe create a lot of pressure for both Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet here to have to surpass for Kenneth Walker what he did 2 years ago, and for Charbonnet to take an even bigger leap here in his second year. So they kind of can't afford a sophomore slump out of him in particular, if that's the way they roll. We'll see what that is. Justin, your thoughts on this Seahawks team that is looking like straight up a bounce back 2024 campaign? Because internally, at least, like for that team had a lot higher expectations of themselves last year than what ended up being the case, which was missing the postseason.
Well, I think a lot of their issues were injury-based. I mean, Geno missing time was rough. I mean, even when he was on the field, there were times where he didn't look like himself. So it took away from things. DK Metcalf was hurt a lot of last year. Tyler Lockett is always a little banged up. Kenneth Walker missed time. Their key offensive pieces were an issue. I will say I actually think that they got an upgrade as their backup quarterback. I think Drew Lock has never, in the 5 years he's been there, thrown for over 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns. Even if he had 21 interceptions, let's face it, he was on the Washington Commanders, and their defense was terrible last year. So he probably should have won a few more games just based on the offense alone. But that's a different story. I think their defense kind of struggled from what I'm going to call cowboy disease this season, which was, a lot of big plays, a lot of interceptions, a lot of great defensive moves, but they gave up a lot of big plays too. I think this head coach that they signed is, the perfect fit. Because if you're coming from Baltimore, that's not okay. If you're coming from Baltimore, their teams are built on defense. I mean, as great as Lamar is, 2 MVPs, blah, 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 defense is what leads that team. And that's what's most important. And this will clean up a little bit, or I'm assuming his main thing will be to clean up those big plays and prevent the over the top and all that stuff. And I think those are two very important things. It's staying healthy on offense and preventing big plays on defense. And there's no reason why this team shouldn't have another bounce back year.
No, fair point. And I think this team has the talent. They showed us 2 years ago. And if anything, this team in theory should be better on paper than what they were 2 years ago, right? So I don't know about better,
but they should be what they are.
Well, think about it. It's 2 more years under the belt for guys like a Charles Cross, who was a rookie when they had the playoff appearance in 2022, right? So 2 years of NFL experience, he should be better. 2 more years of DK being number one, 2 more years of Tyler Lockett, so there's that connection. Now 2 more years of Kenneth Walker. He was a rookie in that 2022 team. There are guys that, in theory, you're supposed to progress. Now, I know progression is not always linear. Some guys start off hot, flame out. We just talked about it in the JHI, right? Year 2 had a breakout campaign, mainly 3 good games for himself, and just could not put it together for the rest of his career, in part due to injuries and other factors. So I'm not saying that that's a guarantee, but in theory, what should happen is that a team where guys, when they were younger, were able to get something done with still being young, more experience, should be able to weather. And I think we talk about consistency, we talk about injury. I almost wonder, I'm not slandering him, but I almost wonder if a new voice is kind of what the team needed. And I'm not saying it because Pete Carroll is someone that doesn't bring energy, right? Pete Carroll, it's the definition of energy, even at his age, which is remarkable. He's a guy with so much experience that you could lean on, right? But you almost kind of have to wonder for some of the guys in that locker room if the message just wasn't resonating anymore. That whatever way that Pete Carroll normally gets to guys just didn't work for this team last season. And maybe there was time for a new voice. Or maybe a future Rick's conspiracy theory that they pushed him out on purpose for whatever reason. Probably is the case. But you bring a new coach there, and we'll see how it goes, to say the very least. But yeah, I think consistency, health, which is going to be a key point for one of these teams coming up, if not both of them that we're about to talk about, and the voice of the coach and how Mike Macdonald's going to what's the word I'm looking for that is escaping my brain at the moment, establish himself in Seattle and what he could do for this team and how he's going to lead this team going forward. Should be interesting to say the very least. But we kind of have alluded to this in previously. I'm not going to ask the same question I asked last week when it came to the Lions and the Packers, but I almost wonder, depending on, this solely depends on what position they're in, but if Seattle could be a team that, pokes around the conversations for players available at the trade deadline if they see a deal that they really like going forward. Because honestly, The thought just crossed my brain because like they bring a guy over from Baltimore. I forget what the timeline was with McDonald being the officially named head coach and when Patrick Queen signed with the Steelers. You almost wish you had like if Mike McDonald could take someone from that Ravens defense he had, if he could have Patrick Queen with him here in Seattle to kind of be like that linchpin for this team. Wouldn't that be nice? But obviously Pittsburgh, that was a banger of a signing. They're not going to give him up. I'm just saying, like a guy like that maybe is what Seattle could try to look at if the opportunity comes. But speaking of opportunity. Speaking of a team that had a defensive linchpin, it's not there anymore. The Los Angeles Rams, the several times back defending Super Bowl champions previously. This was a team, the last non-Kansas City Chiefs team to win the Super Bowl, put it like that. Look, this was the team that 2022, first year we did the podcast, they were coming off that Super Bowl win. Had thoughts about them being really good in 2022. Didn't happen. They were not good. They dealt with injury issues. Guys just kind of fell off a cliff. Certain things. It brought up a lot of questions internally in that locker room. What was the gumption of the team? Well, the gumption was they were pretty good last season. And it wasn't the smoothest start last year. I remember it was one of Justin's questions in the game section of what, did you believe the Rams were going to make the postseason? There was a question in some way, shape, or form. And the Rams, they made the postseason last year. And they fell in a very closely contested wild card game against the Detroit Lions. And this is a team that, man, could they do something this year? Maybe. Or could they take a step back again? Maybe. That is very much a potential thing that could happen to the Rams, right? And to me, I'm not saying that, because he is no longer on the team, everything's going to fall apart. But I'm very interested to see what that defense does with Aaron Donald not being there anymore. Just forget from a production perspective. The leadership, the legacy that he had built there, the respect of his teammates, and just what he would do on the field, his presence. Even if he wasn't getting a sack at the end of the possession, that there's a chance he may have done something to lead to a sack on that possession. If the pictures of him being double, triple team were something to behold. It's very interesting to see. Now, of course, obviously, it's more than just the one guy. It's Matthew Stafford. Can he be healthy again this season? He kind of bounced back from a 2022 where the three of us were wondering what his long-term health is going to be. Looked pretty good in 2023. Can it hold up for another year in 2024? Cooper Kupp was relatively fine for the back half of last year, but I think he started a bit dinged up in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Then 2022, there were injury issues. Are those going to rear their ugly head again? Right? They can, for all we know. It's a very interesting thing with this team, to say the very least. This is why I bring back up once again the idea of injuries. Will they be able to avoid being snake bitten this year, or is that going to be what does them in again? Justin, the Rams 2023 made the wild card. Competitive game against Detroit. That's pretty good, but this is a team that 2 seasons prior to that won the Super Bowl. Whatever our thoughts might be about them as we get closer to our predictions here towards the end of the episode, your thoughts on the Rams going into 2024?
There's a lot of question marks. I think 2 or 3 years ago, whenever they won the Super Bowl, they sold their souls. I would do it too. They got what they wanted. They came out on top. They won a Super Bowl. And then ever since then, I think that they've tried to manipulate the salary cap in order to sign big-name veterans. And it hasn't necessarily worked out in their favor the way that it did their Super Bowl year. They caught lightning in a bottle. They traded all their draft picks. They signed a bunch of guys. They screwed up their cap. And now they're kind of trying to get out of it. And one of the ways you do it is by drafting what looks like a generational talent at a wide receiver in Puka Nacua. We'll see what he does year 2, but kid had an awesome first year. Cooper Kupp is still there. Still, in my mind, top 5 receiver in football. He's on the field. That dude is unbelievable at all times. And they almost kind of look like very similar players in my mind, but we can get more in depth in that in a different episode. The question is, how do you replace the veteran talent that has all but dried up on that team? Because it's pretty much gone. You have Cooper Kupp, you have Matt Stafford, and who else really? I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to put the team down, but I look through their roster. I mean, there's Tyler Higbee. It's all right. It's like a decent veteran. Tre'Davious White is a guy they signed. He's got a lot of good years, but what?
Also injury concerns there with him.
what is left of that Super Bowl team? What is, the end game with the roster you have? I mean, obviously you're trying to fill in as many young spots as you can while you still have these veterans in there. This way you can kind of plug and play guys as it goes. But there's so many issues I see with this team that I'm not sure they have the horses to catch. I mean, you want to talk about an injury derailing a team like we did at the NFC East. Matthew Stafford goes down. That's a difference between a potential wild card team and a potential first overall pick, in my mind. I mean, it's that bad. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, we haven't seen good play to Jimmy Garoppolo in 2 years. He's suspended for 2 games this year. And there's major concerns about his shoulder, is it? On his throwing?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
I mean, maybe he's there as like a coaching backup and they're trying to build up Stetson Bennett. We don't know what that dude has because he was not even active last year.
Right.
So if Stafford goes down and they got, for all intents and purposes, rookie Stetson Bennett throwing them the ball, I mean, I expect them to get their flowers. Don't get me wrong. They'll have decent seasons. I could see both of them having a 1,000-yard season, but it's not going to win you a lot of games. And I don't necessarily know that this defense has the horses to pick up where they left off with Aaron Donald. I mean, they were in the bottom 10 in sacks last year. They only had 41 sacks, and now they lost the Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
They were in the back half of passing touchdowns allowed and passing yards allowed. Where does that get better? Does Tre'Davious White have his first healthy season in 3 years and, they bounce back? Or is it more of the same from a Rams team that's trying to plug holes with veterans that haven't worked out? In a tough division like this, where you have the Seahawks hopefully coming back to power and the Cardinals doing their best to, make some exciting new changes in their offense, what do you have outside of Stafford and your 2 young receivers that's really going to excite teams? I mean, look, Kyron Williams also, really good young running back. Dude gets hurt.
Yeah.
Right? Let's see. How many games has he missed in his career? I don't think it's a ton, but I mean, when you have guys going down, it's not on. He hasn't played a 16-game season yet. He's got 10 and 12. He's got 22 out of the
34
games.
Yeah. Is this the team? I'm sorry to cut you off, but is this the team? Because we've mentioned injuries so far on a number of teams, but is this the team where we have the most amount of injury concerns? Because it goes from the starting quarterback to the backup quarterback to the starting running back to the top wide receiver, who the last 2 years has had the injury concerns, to Tyler Higbee, who's had injury concerns. He's not one of their starting offensive linemen for what I'm seeing right now, but the guy who they paid, Joe Noteboom, was supposed to be one of their starting tackles. He's listed as a backup right now, in part because
he was never what they wanted him to be, unfortunately.
True. And then and then you look at the defense, Tre'Davious White, right? There's a lot of injuries here.
Yeah, I think it's the most concern for injuries, but not the most injury concerns. Because there's a lot of guys that, sure, but you could say that about any 53-man roster. The issue here is the depth behind their main pieces, and they don't really have a lot of other focal points to their team.
That's always been their issue. Yeah, Justin's, you're right. It's always been their issue. I mean, look at a couple of years ago when we were talking about when Matt Stafford got hurt, they were starting John Wolford as their quarterback, and then they brought in Baker Mayfield, and all that did was parlay Baker into a Tampa Bay run. It didn't help the Rams out at all, but it got Baker his last chance, and it worked out. Look, I'm going to say it. Not a good year for the Rams this year. It's not. Because there's also this idea that sustained consistency for the things that worked well last year, and it's not going to happen this year around. Puka Nacua is not going to break his own records. He's not. If you want to look at, if you want to claim that Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are in the same mold, then I agree with you. They're kind of in the same mold. What happened after Cooper Kupp's ridiculous year? The very next year, he got hurt. He only played 8 games. He was not the same. He's not the same guy that he was. Not saying that's going to happen to Nacua, but you run that risk. And I mean, now that he's no longer an unknown, now that he's a known, you're going to have a lot more targets go against him. this running attack, Kyron Williams is your number one, yeah, but you're telling me that Boston Scott's going to be a capable number two? I don't see it. They drafted Blake Corum, but that's not really going to do much of anything, I don't think. And I can't tell you, I mean, aside from maybe Steven Vila and Joe Nudeboom, I can't tell you who's on this offensive line that, like, is worthy of a Pro Bowl nod or an All-Pro nod or anything like that. This is an offensive line that's a little sketchy to me. Maybe Havenstein, but he's just 6'8", so he's a monster. You can't miss him. But look, I like what they did in their first couple picks this year. I liked Jared Verse. I liked Braden Fisk. But they're basically the same guy. What you basically did was you drafted two guys to replace one guy, because the two of them combined make up what Aaron Donald was. And without Aaron Donald there, you have to rely on two separate guys to try and plug up two spots, and that's going to make your defensive line weaker. It's subtraction by addition if you want to go the reverse side of it.
I don't disagree with you, but how are you supposed to replace Aaron Donald?
Oh no, you can't. You absolutely can.
They are absolutely doing their best to do it.
100%.
Yeah, and I don't know if you could have done better in terms of drafting.
And if we're being technical,
but
yeah,
I think it's unfair to say, like,
right,
how is that supposed to replace Aaron? It's not.
But also,
no, it's not. But the point that I'm trying to make is that, like, that's in year one. You're going to see that big difference, and you have to adjust and adapt to that, to not having that, and to adding those two guys along with Kobe Turner, who you drafted the last year, and Byron Young, who was that breakout rookie linebacker for them last year too. The problem too also is that this I bring this up a lot, and it kind of goes by the wayside, but I think in this scenario now, so more than ever, it really means a lot. This is a Rams team that has a lot of new faces on their coaching staff as well. Eric Henderson was their D-line coach and run game coordinator. He's gone. He's at USC. Raheem Morris was their D coordinator. He's gone. Zach Robinson was also on this coaching staff as the passing game coordinator. He's gone. Jimmy Lake, assistant head coach, gone. Jeremy Springer, special teams assistant, gone. Chris Shula is now their D coordinator. Okay, he's a name. Shula, I guess, fine. But who else did they hire? Well, they hired Sean Desai, the terrible defensive coordinator for the Eagles, to be their defensive assistant coach. They hired Giff Smith, who was the interim head coach of the Chargers, to be their D-line coach and running game coordinator. It's like that is kind of where you're plugging and placing on the coaching staff and mixing and matching so often, because, look, one of the things that Sean McVay is very, very, very good at, and I will give him his props for this, and this is kind of a ham-handed compliment, but I mean it in the best way. He's a guy that can get other guys hired at bigger roles at other places.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stay with him and build that, but because of how well they do under him and because of how well they appear in interviews, they get other roles in other spots.
He's a kingmaker. Like like you just mentioned all the guys that just left over the last calendar year or so.
Yep.
Like, think about all the guys who have left before. Like, Sean McVay is a kingmaker. He has gotten so many guys paid over the last 3 to 5 years to, like you said, become, like, go to other places, be in higher positions, and get paid more. Because at the end of the day, like, there's only so many jobs that you can have on an NFL coaching staff.
Right. But you're chasing that bag, and yeah, Sean McVay is a kingmaker. But when all the king's horses and all the king's men leave, and they realize they can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again, then what happens? And Humpty Dumpty's looking a lot more like Matt Stafford, to be honest with you, nowadays.
I was just about to ask you who's Humpty Dumpty in this.
Yeah, he's Matt Stafford. Because again, like, when has Matt Stafford has had 2 back-to-back years of consistency of being on the field? The pandemic year and leading to his first year in LA. Those are the last 2 years that he was on the field for 95% of the season, if that. Like, you haven't seen that. And last year was a good year. But if anybody's on borrowed time, it's Stafford. And, I mean, Rodgers is too. But if anybody in the NFC is on borrowed time, it's Matthew Stafford. Like, he's 36. The ghosts of old Rams quarterback past are knocking on the door. They're going to get to him this year. And I think the Rams will have talented pieces. Some will have very good seasons. Some of them might get traded at the deadline, because this is not going to be a good year for the Rams. I'm booking it right now, and I think it's, like we said, they sold their soul in 21 for the title, and last year was maybe an aberration because Stafford had a renaissance year, but this is going to be a rough year for them.
Well, also important to note, Matthew Stafford never in his career has he made the postseason in back-to-back years.
Right.
Never accomplished in Detroit, and 2 out of 3 so far in Los Angeles.
Right.
And part of that is even when because to be fair, in Detroit he was healthy, but it was inconsistency in not necessarily because of him. No,
right. Yeah.
No, he had a long stretch of years where he did play all 16 games, but he would in some specific games maybe like tweaks his hand a little bit, maybe his ankle is a little bit off for like 2-3 weeks, and also the inconsistency of play of the pieces around him, right? Like, aside from Megatron, who was the second best offensive skill position player he consistently had in Detroit for his career there? And I'll give you time.
Because best was Kenny Galladay, probably.
And that was to the end of his time in Detroit. Sienna didn't like that either.
No, not a fan of that. Not a fan of that. You mentioned Kenny Galladay in this house as a Giants fan is living here, and that's not going to go over very well.
So it's very interesting. Now, you were mentioning the Aaron Donald point before, Rick. Like, obviously, there's no individual player that they're going to get lucky with to replace the impact of Donald. I think statistically, you can obviously get the guys that could equate to his sacks, if not more, because Rick mentioned the 2 of them. But, when we did our look back of the 2023 draft a couple months back before we went into our 2024 mock, both Rick and I picked those 2 young guys, Kobe Turner and Byron Young. And the 2 of them are going to have to take like a step further, right, in their career and their development of like, okay, they both had like about 8-9 sacks last year, each of them. Now they both need to get double digits, if anything. And at least one of the 2 between Fisk and Verse needs to flirt with a double-digit sack season. They can make up the production on paper, but it's the impact. It's like I was saying before, the leadership, the legacy, the fear that Aaron Donald instills by himself gave that Rams defense a chance, right? They don't have that guy anymore. They don't have that individual guy at any level. Because I know, obviously, 2022 was a terrible year for the squad. But on paper, it was Jalen Ramsey in the secondary. It was Aaron Donald in the front 4. And it was Bobby Wagner in between the 2. And obviously, yes, I know at the end they didn't end up winning as much as they should have for a myriad of reasons. Stafford got hurt, this, that, and the third. But there was a guy in each level. The year before, their Super Bowl run, it was Ramsey, it was Donald, Von Miller, Floyd. Like, there were multiple guys there that at least either benefited from Donald or Von Miller has his own aura, we're being honest, right? Well, at least he did that. Now, who on this defense, can win you a game by themselves? Aaron Donald can win you a game by himself. He's probably one of the only 2 defensive players we could say that about over the last decade or so. Maybe the only one, depending on your point of view on certain guys. He might be the lone defensive player that could win a game legitimately by himself, by his own impact over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Right? Again, I'm saying it's debatable. If you have more guys, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying.
No, I know. He's definitely on that list.
Yeah, it's a short list, and he's probably number 1 of the non-quarterbacks, obviously. So it's a conversation of not what the Rams will do statistically to make up for it. What will they do behind the scenes? How will that locker room be? How will the cohesiveness be? Who is the voice of this defense? Who is the voice? And this kind of goes to what Justin was saying. Almost all the veterans on that, just talking about the Super Bowl team, are gone. And then now you look at the locker room itself, there's a lot of young guys in this locker room, man. And it's going to go one of 2 ways. Either all these young guys together in this locker room, they're going to galvanize with the fact that they're all young and they're all hungry and they have something to prove, and they can be good soldiers for McVay and the staff to get it together, and maybe they could surprise us. Or there's a bit too much chaos because there is not that one voice to kind of be the extension of the coach, right? So it's going to be an intriguing year, to say the very least, for Los Angeles. And, between the Rams and the Seahawks, obviously, they both have one goal. Well, multiple goals, if we're being honest. But as of now, there's one goal. Before you get to the postseason, before you try to make a run in the NFC, before you try to get the Lombardi once again, you need to take down the head of the division. And that was the San Francisco 49ers last season, boys. Transition. The San Francisco 49ers won the NFC last year. They made it to the Super Bowl, and they were a handful of plays away from being the Super Bowl champions, if we're being honest, right? even ignoring the fact that game went into overtime, they could have very easily have won that game without going into overtime. But if ifs and nuts, or if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, I think a lot of people would be a lot happier in this world. But that's just not how it works. So this is a San Francisco 49er team. Once again, it's Lynch and Shanahan as the GM and coach duo. It's big clock Brock Purdy being the quarterback there. It's run CMC Christian McCaffrey coming off a fantastic year last season. Was named Offensive Player of the Year, if memory serves. It is a wide receiving core with its top two guys being Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Tight end, George Kittle. Offensive line, spearheaded by the very much so future Hall of Famer, Trent Williams. On the defensive side, it's Leonard Floyd and Javon Hargrave are the support guys for Nick Bosa. It is a linebacking core that Fred Warner is the guy. He's not going to have his number 2 with him because Dre Greenlaw unfortunately got injured in the Super Bowl last year, and he's probably going to miss majority of the regular season, if not the whole thing. Haven't seen any updates recently, but I don't think it's anything. I haven't seen anything to sway off the idea that he's going to miss a significant chunk of time in the regular season. And then it's a kind of defensive backfield by committee. Maybe there's some decent guys there, but they've never had a star, like an active star / superstar in the defensive backfield under the Kyle Shanahan tenure. They had Richard Sherman for a couple years, but he wasn't the same Seattle Seahawks Richard Sherman that he was, So, this is the team that proved to be the class of the NFC in 2023, made it to the NFC title game in 2022, and the NFC title game. Are you saying a pattern here? This is a team that has consistently been within the final 4 teams in the NFL for the last 5 years. It's going to take a couple things to derail them from that. Are we starting to see little hints of that, boys? That's the question. Who did I start with the Rams? I forget. I started with Justin, right? So, Rick, I'll start with you. The San Francisco 49ers 2024, what do they finally have to do to exercise their demons? But the counter, what could derail them this season?
What do they have to do to exercise their demons? Well, I think what they have to do is they've got to find ways to avoid sustaining more injuries than what they currently have, because it's not just Greenlaw, it's a few other names that are on there that are problems. It's Talanoa Hufanga, who got hurt in week 11 last year. He's starting on the PUP list. It's Ricky Pearsall, their rookie wide receiver they drafted. He's hurt. It's Drake Jackson, their other defensive end. He's hurt. Now they've added in new pieces. They've added in Gross Matos on the D line. They've added in Rock Yassin in the secondary, and they gave themselves a second tight end for Will because they added Logan Thomas from Washington to help with George Kittle. They have to also just avoid the drama. And unfortunately for San Francisco, for a team that's this good, there's going to be drama. And you see it already. Brandon Ayuk is a hold-in because he wants a new deal. And can the Niners come to terms with that, while Trent Williams, their top star tackle, is a hold-out from training camp? So they have to juggle the training camp with the 2 big names that they have who are desperately seeking Susan and also contracts as well. That's a 90s a TV show reference for everyone there. Does the Brandon Ayuk contract debacle hurt Deebo in any way? Does that make him more disgruntled? Christian McCaffrey has his deal, so he's set. And one other thing they need to also figure out is that Brock Purdy has to shed that media attention of, well, yeah, he threw for 4,200 yards, but he's really just a game manager. Because when you think of the Niners, you don't think of Brock Purdy first. You think of McCaffrey first. You think of Ayuk. You think of Jawan Jennings, maybe. You think of Kittle. You don't think about Brock Purdy until maybe the 5th or 6th guy, potentially, on this offense. Look, this is a good Niners team. Plain and simple. They've got a very tough schedule. I can see them being undefeated going into that week 7 matchup when they host Kansas City. And that's the real test. If they get into that game and they're in a good position, if they can exercise those demons, then this is the team that has a very good chance to go 17-0 in the regular season. But that's the test, is you have to get there first, and you've got a tough battle on week 1 against the Jets. You've got the Seahawks right before then in Seattle on a Thursday night game. So, can you survive that? Apparently, if you listen to was it the Up and Adams show? If DeAndre Lenore's carbon dioxide detector keeps beeping like it has been for the past year, and he's been sleeping with it on because it's a superstition, it's good for him that it's on for him, which is the weirdest thing I've ever heard of in my entire life. Then maybe, but I think until proven otherwise, that this is the team that had this debate in the NFC West, and they could honestly win 11 games this year. They could have a down year for them, and it still wouldn't matter because I still think that they're far and away the best team in this division, even with all the drama that they have.
Right. And like this is a team. They have the talent, and they're going to need to rely on that talent because you made note of their schedule. You're opening the season Monday night primetime against the New York Jets, and an Aaron Rodgers who is trying to come back from injury, and an Aaron Rodgers who it's always interesting when he faces San Fran, considering that's the team that so many moons ago could have drafted Aaron Rodgers potentially. Then they have Minnesota, which we're not too high on Minnesota, so maybe that's almost like a halfway bye week. But Minnesota beat them last season, if I'm not mistaken.
There is also one other thing that I do want to mention. Ship Brandon Staley to the far ends of the earth and just lock him away from there. Don't let him near any sort of play calling ability because it will be the death of you this season.
He is he is the associate head coach.
Yes, he is.
But going back to the Niners schedule, right? So after Minnesota, you have the likes of the Rams. There's some softballs in there that, they should handle business, but let's be real here. Teams always drop a game. Any given Sunday is the theory. Yeah. And then the last 3 games before their bye week, it's Seattle, Kansas City, Dallas. Then the first 3 games out of their bye week, or let's say first 4, it's Tampa, it's Seattle, it's Green Bay, and it's Buffalo. Yeah. Like I think, honestly, the Week 9 bye week, we were talking about bye weeks in previous episodes. I feel like they have a great bye week because this, week 8 to 10 is like the bye week range where you're hoping for, where you get that almost middle of the season. It's not middle of the season anymore because, 17 games. But it's almost the middle of the season. You've played some tough games so far. You give the bodies rest. You come back together, and you have time. And it's not the first game back. It's a decent game, but it's not a primetime game. It's a Sunday 1:00 game in Tampa against the Buccaneers. Serious team. You should take them seriously. But the stage is not there, right? So it's almost one of those things where I think we've talked about other teams and how the schedule, maybe did them. I actually think for the most part, when you're a top team, you have to play other top teams. So that's the hand you're dealt. But I think San Fran actually scheduling wise, it's not the worst hand possible. Yes, the opponents are tough, but it's because they're that good. And for how it was scheduled, it's pretty balanced scheduling actually for the most part because they have multiple spaces in between those tough games with mid-tier or lower tier teams. You mentioned some of the drama. So Justin, I'll move it over to you. It's it could be here and there, what drama could potentially do to a team to start the season, right? We saw the impact of the Chris Jones holdout last season for Kansas City early. Just the defense, they needed their guy back, and once they got their guy back, Chris Jones made his impact. They were winning before he came back, but they were truly felt more complete when he was back, and then we saw what happened in the postseason, right? The Chiefs defense played phenomenal in the postseason. Your thoughts about the holdouts? Rick mentioned the injuries as well. Give your thoughts about the pieces of this team who's potentially missing, but why they still could be good enough to overcome all that.
They overcame it all last year. Trent Williams went down for a couple games. Deebo Samuel went down for a couple of games. Deommodore Lenoir missed some time. They all missed time for the most part at points during the season, but they come back. They're healthy when it matters. They're managed. Their load is managed well. And on paper, they are arguably the most complete team in football. There really isn't a position that you're really they're lacking in. Maybe quarterback, honestly, but I don't even think so. He's at the very least a middle of the pack quarterback. So assuming they could stay 80 to 90% healthy, there's no reason why they shouldn't be favored in pretty much every game. Take the division games out because division creates a weird parity where you never know who's going to win. There's really only about 6 games on this schedule where you could say to yourself, these were winning teams last year. Maybe it's a close game. Maybe they don't pull it out at the end. But even still, I would argue that they're favored in most of those games. Maybe not the Chiefs game. I mean, they should be favored against the Lions or the Cowboys or the Dolphins, teams that are really good and are looking to take a step forward this year. But if you want to take a step forward, this is the kind of team you have to beat. So, I mean, they've only gotten better in my mind. I don't anticipate an issue with Ayuk long term. I'm sure they're going to get it figured out. I don't anticipate an issue with Trent Williams long term. I'm sure they're going to get it figured out. But these things take time.
But there was more to that sense at the end. No, like you mentioned it, Justin, and I don't think we've made this comment yet. And I feel like there was maybe 3 teams we said this about last year. This is arguably the most complete team in football.
Yeah.
They have the quarterback who he's, whatever your comments or thoughts are on about him, he's proven more often than not he can actually manage the game relatively well. He missed a couple throws last year in big moments in the Super Bowl, but I don't know if Brock Purdy is the first person you point the finger at when it comes to who lost that game.
There's lots of reasons why they didn't win that game. It was not just Brock Purdy.
No, I know, and that's why it's a quarterback. Like he's gonna be able to help you win the game more often than not, and he's proven that, right? Christian McCaffrey is probably the best running back in football at this point, and when he's healthy, he's certainly the most versatile. It seems like that's a pretty good top 2 wide receiver. I wouldn't necessarily say the depth of that wide receiver room because, like Rick mentioned, the draft pick that they're hoping can make an impact is hurt to start the season, Purcell. But your top 2 guys are at least there. George Kittle, tight end, dude is, he's a receiving threat, but he can maul with the best of them in terms of helping block.
I didn't even talk about him. He's a great blocker and he's a great receiver. He's a complete player.
If anything, I almost think that they kind of need to bring that side of Kittle out more, that dominant receiver, right? Like,
keep him healthy. That's his issue.
That's true. Well, I mean, we could say that about a couple of guys, but like, it almost feels like to me, like we need to get back the Kittle that could challenge Travis Kelce for the most yards in a season by a tight end. That was early in his career when he was doing that. Obviously, it was less injuries. And maybe we won't get that exact one, but 70, 75% of that, maybe you could get it back. Like this defense, there are a couple pieces that are hurt. We need to see, but if Nick Bosa could stay healthy, he's the most important piece of that front 7. Not Greenlaw, excuse me. Fred Warner, arguably the best linebacker in all of football. Like those 2 help get the front 7 to a level where the defensive backfield, which I've pointed out the last couple of years, like this has consistently been the weakest part on paper of the Shanahan 49ers era teams. But because the front 7 is so good, that defensive backfield's job is slightly easier, right? So it's like, aside from maybe you'd like a different starter here and there, this is a fantastically built squad. And like you guys mentioned, they did have some injury concerns last season, but they were able to overcome it. So you guys have kind of said everything, so I'll just give my closing thoughts. Like San Francisco, if there is a team that can stop Detroit from being like completing a potential destiny type run, if there's a team that can stop the Eagles, Cowboys, or Packers from having a Cinderella type story this year, if there's a team that will squash the hopes and dreams of any wild card team, it's the San Francisco 49ers. And I don't think it's anywhere near out of the realm of possibility if San Fran wins the NFC again. I think it's very much in the realm of possibility, whether they're the first seed or not. It's all about finishing the story. I know I make it a little, like I say a joke sentence to an extent for several reasons, but I'm being serious. Like finishing the job is kind of what the tagline for the squad could be, because we talked about windows, right? We're slowly approaching a critical time for this team's window where this time, well, not this time next year, but you know what I mean. What is Brock Purdy's contract going to look like? What players are going to be sacrificed to have to pay him if they do pay him? If they plan to replace him, who do they replace him with? What skill position players are still here? If they end up paying Ayuk and Williams now, who's going to be sacrificed by this time next year? Like, the Niners have had a lot of good fortune to be able to get to this point with the talent they have. The clock ticks, and time does not care about your potential. Time does not care about your talent. Time does not care about any of that. All time cares about is moving forward. And you have to take advantage of the time you have. This San Francisco team, they can do it, man. They were 6 minutes away the first time against Kansas City. And they're, 5 minutes away this next time? they are the definition of this close to winning the Super Bowl. It just has to break. It just has to finally happen for them. And man, like last year almost felt like close to perfect. Obviously, the disappointment of Drake Greenlaw being hurt in the Super Bowl, just running out to the field, is one of those freak injury things that almost feels like bad luck. If I was a betting man, I probably would have bet.
Bad luck. That's the straight up definition of bad luck.
No, I understand it, but I mean, like as a snowball, like the sign of, oh no, this is actually going to get really, really bad. Like that's what I mean. Like the snowball effect that night of, oh, they lost the game. Like it's one of those things where it's just, man, like I don't know. Like this is a team that I feel like for last year, for the most part, compared to what usually happens to them, avoided the bad timing on the injuries, except for that. So it's like, oh man. Poor San Fran, to say the very least. But we'll see. It's 2024. It's another year for them to be great, and they could be the number 1 seed. I think a lot of people are going to favor them as that. They could be the number 2 seed and go into the number 1 seed's house and upset them. They can. They really can. Now, I know people will bring up questions about Kyle Shanahan on the road in the postseason and in the fourth quarter and game planning. Okay, there's a lot of questions about Kyle Shanahan, eh? Should that be our kind of like final point to make? What do you guys think? Will Kyle Shanahan be able to exercise whatever demons he has, I guess?
Yeah, I think eventually. I mean, he's a really good coach. Yes, but look at who he's played. I mean, arguably the 2 best quarterbacks that I've seen in my generation. Unfortunately, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. Also, arguably 2 of the best franchises on historic runs. Like, it's just eventually he's going to – I mean, I guess it doesn't have to happen. There's guys like Ewing that never made it over Jordan. But, like, in my mind, he's going to – they've been so good for so long, and if they can keep it up at this level, the idea that they're not going to break through would baffle me.
So I have in my mind's eye, I have 2 different ways this could go for Kyle Shanahan, because I look at 2 coaches that I think I could say are comparable to him, at least based upon history. He could either be Mike Holmgren, where this is the year that they finally breaks over the hump, because remember the Packers went to 3 playoffs before they won the Super Bowl in '96, including the year before they were the NFC Central Division winner, and they went to the NFC title game and lost, so he could do that. Or he could be Marv Levy and lose 4 straight Super Bowls and never sniff playoff success ever, So I believe that Kyle Shanahan's a good coach. I believe that he's got a good mind for it. He's got a good coaching staff. I think they kind of dodged a bullet not having Belichick be their defensive coordinator. I'm just going to put it out there. But, let's see. I mean, the thing is that the tape is out on these guys, right? And so now you have to see and you have to change things around. And maybe things are going to be better for them because, the tape's out so they can adapt new identities and new play schemes. But I don't know. Let's see what happens week 1. Let's see what happens in the night when lights are bright, And if the Niners go out there on week 1 and they take down the Jets in a convincing fashion, then I think you can officially say the Niners are still the class. But if the Niners struggle to win, or if they lose to the Jets, which would be, I think Justin's greatest fantasy, if the Jets beat the NFC champions, in week 1, then you might have some more concerns about where this team might fall. So,
I'm not concerned about a week 1 game.
Well, no, I just mean like an opening statement to the season could be
I think that it would say more about the Jets than it would about the Niners.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, boys, we have done the breakdown. Now it's time for our predictions for this. Probably should have a lower third somewhere. Next time. All right. We're going to give our predictions for the NFC West for the upcoming 2024 season. We're going to go from the bottom to the top, just like we did with this, from 4 to 1. Justin, you could start us off. Who will be your 4th seed in the NFC West for 2024?
My 4th seed in the NFC West for 2024 is going to be the Los Angeles Rams. And I don't like to bet on injury, but I'm just not convinced that another year that one of those three main guys doesn't go down. And I mean, obviously, I don't think Puka missed a game last year, but he had some nagging issues. Cooper Kupp has torn his ACL twice now. Stafford always seems to have a major injury. They have a very tough division to play in. I think that they have one of the tougher schedules in their division. It's not going to be easy playing the AFC East. It's not going to be easy playing the NFC North. Like I said, I don't want to bet on injury, but I don't see them having a great year this year. I'm not saying they're going to be terrible, but nothing stellar.
I have the Cardinals as my 4th seed. I think even with the potential injury concerns there in Los Angeles, I still think the questions with the Cardinals that I had is enough to just make them the 4th seed. But I don't think it'll be too big of a disparity. I could definitely see a case where the Cardinals, even maybe the Rams, I don't know if you had a win total in mind, but I think the Cardinals could be a team. They're 6-11 is what they do for their wins.
Teams
but,
like right around there.
But the Rams could go like 7-10 or 8-9. Like last year there was like a 6-win difference between the two of them. I don't think that's the case this year. But the Cardinals are my 4th seed. So Rick, your 4th seed?
I'm in lockstep with Justin, and I have the Rams going 5-12 because I, like Justin was saying, I don't like to bet on injury either, but I just don't see these guys lasting a full season. And I think that's a big detriment to them. I really do. And the pieces that they added don't really inspire a lot of confidence in me. I think Jared Verse is a very talented player, and I think that he will get some defensive rookie of the year consideration. But I think this is a good year for Sean McVay's club. 5-12 for the Rams.
Fair enough. I'm just happy we're finally not being lockstep for 4-1 like usual, so I'm cool with this. 3rd seed, Rick. We'll just stay with you. Who is your 3rd seed? I can take a guess.
Well, we're gonna have the lockstep fall by the wayside here. I told you guys at the very beginning I'm a little more bullish on another team than you thought I was. I have the Seahawks at 8-9 and 3rd place. There were some concerns that I have with the Seahawks team. Even though they have a very good defensive backfield, there are some concerns that I have with their offense and with a brand new head coach and honestly a brand new coaching staff in general. I think you'll see this team lose some games that they shouldn't lose. I think that this is a squad that's going to struggle in games that they should walk away easily with a win. So I think that this is going to be a tough year for Seattle. I have them in 3rd place, 8-9.
Wow. Okay. I have the Rams as my 3rd place team. I kind of already alluded to it, so I might as well just say it. I think they're a little bit better than Arizona. But I think they're a step and a half or two behind to my top 2 teams in the NFC West. So I have and I kind of like Justin. I do think they'll probably get one of their big 3 guys injured, but I'm assuming it shouldn't be for too long of a period of time where it'll really hurt them. Now, if one of those guys misses like half the season, start to sweat this pick a little bit, to say the least. But I'll have the Rams as my 3rd in the NFC West. So, Justin?
I have the Cardinals here. I think it's close. I do agree with you, Jurg. I do think that the Rams are probably the better team on paper. But, I mean, with the possibility of major injury there and just the way their schedule lies, I had the Cardinals either winning one more game or having a tiebreaker around that 6-win, 7-win mark. I think that the Cardinals take that step right above them.
Yeah, and I don't blame you. I have taken injuries into account as well on predictions in the past, and not even just in the NFL, but in my other sports league predictions as well. So I don't blame you at all for having that into account if you're a prediction at all. So there's that. All right, 1st seed. I will give mine first since you each gave the first one for the other 2. My 1st and 2nd. Do I believe in Gino that much? No. The San Francisco 49ers are going to be my 1st seed in the NFC West. We kind of talked about it. Barring the biggest possible calamities, and I'm talking about like 17 guys on this team get injured in a span of 3-4 weeks, which if they were playing in New York more, then maybe. But the Niners are going to be winning this division again, I feel. I think they're just too complete. They're too well-rounded. We've praised them. We've talked about them. The NFC West kind of feels like a foregone conclusion for them. It's more, what seed are they in the playoffs? What do they do in the postseason? That's my thing for them. I think like they're gonna just maybe it takes them a little bit longer to clinch the NFC West this time around than last year. Although the Rams have double-digit wins, so I don't know. I forget off the top of my head when they clinch. But you guys get what I mean. Maybe it takes them a little bit. Maybe they like lose focus in a game late in the season. But I think the NFC West is lockstep there, to say the least. So that means the Seahawks are second to me in the NFC West. So there's that. Justin, your top seed in the NFC West.
I wonder. Until somebody until there's a major change in this roster / coaching staff, or another team proves me wrong, the 49ers are the team to beat in the NFC. Like I said, I think that the Detroit Lions can make some noise, but are they ready to knock off the defending NFC champions? I don't know. We'll see.
Well, they've got a Week 17 matchup to see if they can. Lions are in San Francisco in Week 17 here. I think the drama gets to the Niners a little bit here. They win the division, but they're not the number one seed. I already told you last week the Lions are the number one seed, and I don't think it's close. I think the Niners go 12-5 this year, and I think they win the division. They win it handily, like they go away winning it, but I have them at 12-5 here. I think they're a complete team, but I think that they're going to sleepwalk through some games this year, and that's going to hurt them in the end. They're not going to be the dominant team that everyone thinks they're going to be. And so, yeah, I think 12-5 for them. Every year in the NFL, guys, there's a team that kind of just surprises you, that comes out of nowhere that we think is like a year or two away, and they throw you off for a bit. The Texans last year are my prime example of that. Last year, I think we all said they're a year or two away from being a dominant team. Look what happened. They ended up winning their division that year. I think that happens every year. And so I've seen predictions say that the Cardinals are going to use this year as a springboard for 2025 because people believe that they're going to be a talented team, but they think it's going to be a butt this year, so next year. But I'm bullish on that, and I have them going 10-7, and I have them being a playoff team, a surprise playoff team this year.
Wow.
I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is that talented. I think Kyler Murray, you saw little flashes last year, and I think now that he has his full lateral dexterity back after the ACL tear, he's fully healed from that. I think he's going to be a dangerous step. This is a team that is probably going to mirror that 9-1 team that we saw when they played Buffalo in that really electric game a couple of years ago. And the defense has good pieces. I think that the offense will get them in a slugfest. And I think those are the games where the defense could lose it here or there. But I think the offense has enough talent to give them some wins where they shouldn't win games. I think that they're going to be a year ahead of schedule, and I have them being a wild card team at 10-7.
Whew, that is a spicy take. Also, the second time in the 3 years we've been doing this that Rick is high on the Cardinals, because remember, the first season we did this, 2022, he had them winning the NFC West, I think, but losing in the wild card.
Cardinals, Commanders, and Lions, they all lose in the first round. Get out of here.
That legendary prediction that did not come true.
Well, you know.
All right, so there are all our predictions. This is the most kind of wide open of the predictions, so I gotta get the brain right here. So for me, I have the Cardinals in fourth place, Rams in third, Seahawks second, 49ers first. For Justin, he has the Rams in fourth, the Cardinals in third, the Seahawks second, and the 49ers first. And Rick has the Rams fourth, the Seahawks third, the Cardinals second, and the 49ers first. Perfect, I got that. All right. That, guys, is our full breakdown of not just the NFC West, but the NFC. We have given all of our predictions for the NFC over the last couple of weeks, and we're going to bring them back up because once we finish the AFC, for those of you who have been around for a while or if you're new to this, we will do an episode after all the division breakdowns where we give you our full playoff picture, fully confirming reconfirming to you who our division winners are, but also what the 1 through 4 will be, and then our 3 wildcard teams as well. So make sure you stick tuned for that after next month or so. But please stay tuned the next month for the AFC side, of course. You guys know how we typically end the show. We end with the rant podium. But before we get to the rant podium, we just talked a lot of football. It was a fun time, relaxing time. Let's test the brain a little bit here, boys. Because we have a late show edition of Justin's Trivia.
Wow.
First time ever.
Trivia.
Yeah, wow.
So the brain games, they recommence. Justin, what do you got first?
Guys, I don't know what made me look this up during the show, but which Watt brother has the most touchdowns?
Derek.
I think it would be funny if it's JJ. I think it might be JJ.
Derek and JJ.
Yeah.
Probably TJ, isn't it?
It's not. It is JJ with 7, including the playoffs. TJ has 2, including the playoffs, and Derek has 3. I just found that interesting.
That's amazing.
Well, it's the fullback is the guy that you would expect to have them because he plays on offense more often, but no.
Well, believe it or not, offensively, TJ and JJ have this. I'm sorry,
JJ.
Eric and JJ have the same amount of offensive touchdowns scored.
Yeah.
3.
Because remember, Rick, in one of his Defensive Player of the Year seasons, that was the year where they were getting really cute with it, of like putting him out on the goal line to be the tight end, basically. That was the season where they were arguing, should he be the MVP that year?
That's true. You're absolutely right.
Yep. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's that same season he also had a pick 6, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Or maybe there was a season separated.
Yeah.
Maybe that's 2 different years.
It is.
Seems about right. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like led the league in sacks again. Multiple receiving touchdowns, pick 6. Like that was one of like the 2 or 3 seasons over the last like 10, 15 years where there was a really strong argument to give it to a non-quarterback to win the MVP award. But of course, they gave it to a quarterback.
He actually had 5 touchdowns that year and a safety, and had 20 sacks.
Yeah, I'm saying this right now. He was robbed of MVP that year. I don't care who won it. I don't even need to see.
He had a pretty good year.
He should have been the MVP
for sure. And he had 4 forced fumbles and 5 fumble recoveries. He had
okay. The more you bring it up, Justin, the more he should have been the MVP. Come on. Who won it that year? Was it Brady?
It was 2014. I don't know who won it, but
that sounds like Brady.
Yeah. No, it was Rodgers.
As a defensive end,
really?
It's 78 combined tackles, 59 solo tackles, and 20 and a half sacks.
So, Jurg, that year for Rodgers in 2014, he threw 4,380 passing yards, 38 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. That's pretty impressive, but he ended up winning 2 more. I know at the time that was his second. I don't know. I think you can make a case that was JJ.
You could make a case for either side. I think if JJ had it in a year where Rodgers didn't have like an all-time quarterback, like
touchdown interception ratio.
Then he would have gotten it. Like he would have gotten it probably the year before or the year after.
Yeah.
But
just time. See, I hate thinking of history like that because it's just like, oh, you were really good, but in the wrong year. Like I hate that happens to so many guys.
Sometimes that happens.
There was I always point back to this. This was one of our years in college, Justin, when I think in the same year, fair, but there was a year where on the Rams, Donald and Todd Gurley were both making phenomenal cases to potentially be MVP. It had to have been the year that Gurley won Offensive Player of the Year. So I forget what Aaron Donald's defensive stats were that season. But like the two of them were making cases for MVP caliber consideration. And all it was on the media was, oh, which quarterback's going to win it? And it's like, you have running back and a defensive tackle. Why are we not giving it's too early to be upset about the NFL awards.
I'm assuming it was 2018 where Donald had 20 and a half sacks.
It was 17.
It was 17.
Okay, maybe it's back-to-back seasons.
So Donald had 11 sacks in 2017. He was Defensive Player of the Year. Got no MVP votes. Todd Gurley had 1,300 rushing yards and 30 touchdowns. Was Offensive Player of the Year and was second in the AP voting. Got 8 votes. Of course, Tom Brady was the winner with 40 votes. But
I'm thinking of the 2 years separately between them.
But here's the funny part. Guess who was third? Carson Wentz. Which shows the AP doesn't know what the hell they're talking about.
Well, they haven't known for a long time.
Anyways, accurate.
Just to show how crazy that defensive lineman season was for J.J. Watt. Aaron Donald has 0 touchdowns for his whole career.
Yep.
Hall of Famer. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Those two, they're like the first 2 names I think of like defensive players for me. It's like they're probably the first 2 that come.
A jerk. The year that you're talking about, 2018. Yeah, Donald had 20 and a half sacks. Gurley finished third in Offensive Player of the Year voting. The Offensive Player of the Year was won by the MVP, Pat Mahomes. 50 touchdowns and 55,000 passing yards.
Right, so maybe 2017 was the better case there. But still. All right. That being said, fantastic trivia that led us down memory road for a little bit. So gentlemen, after a short view back to the past, that's an F1 joke there. Let's move on to the main event of the show, as always. Rant and Rick's Roast from Podium. Rant. Jesus, he's ranting me now. No, Rick, take us home.
Oh boy, what an intro for this segment there. That was great. All right, gentlemen, the number 3 spot on this ranked podium goes to the uniforms in the All-Star game for Major League Baseball because they were just awful. Like, I know this has been something that's been said time and time again, but it's accurate. Let the guys wear their own jerseys at the All-Star game. We know which league they play for. You don't have to give us stupid jerseys that are like, fresh out of the DHO versus UPS catalog of just like how awful is all these things. Like if I start seeing, it's going to be sponsored by Alibaba or Temu, I think we're in trouble here. So let's just let them wear their own uniforms because that's just who they are. We know what positions they are. We know who they are. We know what league they're on, and call it a day from there. That's number 3. Number 2 for me on the Rand podium this week. This is kind of more of a plea in a way. Can y'all just let Cooper Flagg enjoy his 1 year at Duke without calling him the number 1 overall pick in 2025? Like, I get it. He's probably going to be that. He's a good basketball player and all, but like, at what point did we start to forget that, these are college kids who are going to school? I mean, I understand, especially in college football 25, now you have the NIL and all of that. Like, I get it. Like, that's where we are now. But there's got to be a point where we think to ourselves, I wonder what Cooper Flagg's doing in the Monday morning econ class, or, that he has to take a science lab for a core credit or whatever. Like, he has to do these things. When Coach K was there, I'm sure that they were running around the classes all the time because, he was probably very strict on all that. But I can't imagine John Shire being that strict on actually going to classes, which is just sad because it's a shame for these Duke professors who are probably very good at what they do, who probably teach a very inspiring class. Like, who you never know. You could have the next Dead Poet Society in one of those classes, but you never know because you never go to those classes because you're too busy taking jump shots and getting NIL deals, Cooper. What kind of name is Cooper anyways? It's ridiculous. So yeah, let the kid enjoy his 1 year of school or his 1 semester of school like Kyrie did in that time and place. And number 1 for me, oh boy, Kevin Costner. Look, it was ambitious of you to want to make a Western movie in 2024, shoot it at the same time in 4 parts, call it an epic series, and then have it released in theaters. The one thing that I'm like you counted on was that nobody goes to the movie theaters anymore. So like you're releasing all these things for no particular reason. And because of that, your chapter 1 of the Horizon Epic American Saga or whatever it's called led to chapter 2 being shelved and not being released in the proper time that it was. So, and also just for a finer point, Kevin Costner, you're a moron. Like I don't understand why you call this a passion project. That's all well and good, but like I've never met a person who's passionate about the American West in the way that you are and the way that you claim to be. And I read the plot of the chapter 1 of Horizon, and I got to be honest with you, it's trash. It is a trash plot for a trash movie. Like, I'm sorry, it's not something that I would go see, not something that like I don't think anybody would go see. And so, I don't know. I mean, look, loved you in Field of Dreams. You were okay in For Love of the Game. Didn't see Dances with Wolves because I don't sit in movies for that long. But this is a miss by you. It's a big time miss by you. And I think this should just show you. If you want to release something, go back to Yellowstone. Go back to that TV series where you were angry because they wrote off your character and plead for them to write you back in, or just stop doing what you're doing because I think the boat has passed you by, buddy. You're on the wrong end of the horizon there, Kevin. And I think it's time for you to set off into the sun with Waterworld and with the Mariner and with all those other crappy things that you did back in the 90s as well. So yeah, it's a visceral, but listen, if I was the guy who a couple weeks ago said to America, this is the best we can do with our presidential candidates, and look where we are now. I'm just telling you, clairvoyance over here. Just telling you.
So, soothsayer Rick over here trying to call more shots as he turns the rant podium into a fortune teller.
Listen. I think you appreciate the fact that I'm now calling out like actual people instead of countries, because we can get banned by one person, but if I'm saving countries from the banishment, we're okay in that respect.
True, and maybe depending on the people you end up critiquing, maybe we get more viewers because.
Listen. Just as for you, because you're an F1 guy, I love Azerbaijan. Okay, there you go.
Cut to cease and desist from Kevin Costner.
Well, that's okay. That's okay.
And legal action against the show. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, until Kevin Costner shuts us down, you will see us next time. So thank you so much for joining us on another edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. The NFC half of this journey through our divisional breakdowns is complete. That conference will be pushed to the side. We go to the AFC starting next week. And the conference, home to the Super Bowl champions, home to a lot of really deep, talented teams. I think the AFC is going to be the tougher conference for the three of us to siphon out our 1 through 4s for some of the divisions and who our wild card teams are going to be. There's a lot of talented teams that in the AFC, and we're going to try to divvy out where they break down their division and where they all go at the end of the season over the coming weeks and month plus here on your favorite NFL podcast, whether it's a weeknight, Chaos After Dark, or whether it's a beautiful weekend per usual. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition, and we will see you guys next time for more fun, football, and chaos.